right, Mayor, you've selected input on just about everything in the world this past year. One of the things was of course you were looking at Palafox 2.0, what new Palafox would look like. What did you learn from that survey, and how's that going to be incorporated? Or how do you foresee it being incorporated?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just for some background for folks, that probably within maybe 6 weeks of me starting. So it goes all the way back to late 2022, maybe the first of January of 23. I was given a brief that FPL was about to go repave the roads. And that was their obligation. If you drive down Palafox now, you see all that cut up utilities and all that. Doesn't look very good. That, like any project like that, when they're coming to do utility work, part of their obligation contractually is to finish that. So I put a stop on that and said, wait a second, this is our iconic downtown street. It's what we brag about in tourism. It's what we brag about as locals. Here's a once in a generation opportunity. And if we just go back and repave the road, as a matter of fact, that plan had just the repaving ending half a block east and half a block west. So there'd be nice pave, and then you would just go down to the old road.
Right.
And on the south side, the crosswalk right there at O'Reilly's and Plaza Ferdinand, the pavement ended there. So then the rest of Palafox would have been the old pavement. And I don't fault FPL for that. That's just what the obligation. That's where they did their work.
And that's where they've always done it.
Exactly. Right. And so it is what it is. That was a normal transaction. But trying to think outside the box, we say, well, wait a second. Don't spend a couple $1 million coming in and redoing it. Why don't we put our heads together and figure out, even if it costs a little bit more money and more time, why don't we put our heads together and try to figure out how to make this something, that could really be a big splash. And this is a huge asset for us in our city and in our region, really. And so it really started way back then. And we kind of tried to, put something together that was actually less comprehensive than what's in front of you now because of timing. We were kind of on a finite time frame with FPL in 23. They wanted to have the books closed on that by the end of 23 because they just got a lot of projects going on. So it wasn't as comprehensive of what you see now. We were still going to bring the curbs out and do some things, but it was a little more of a makeshift, better than what it was, but not as holistic as what you see. And so we went down that road, and then we get about 2/3 of the way through, and then FPL, not just around here, but they said, hey, we're putting a pause on hundreds of millions of dollars of projects for whatever reason administratively, and we're just going to pick them back up in the next year. That was great for us because we were able to do what's in front of you now, which is we've been given enough of a runway to really think through, and we've got an engineer to come look at it exactly, a landscape architect, as you saw in the drawing. So by happenstance, I found out about it. And by happenstance, we had enough time to get the product that's in front of you now. What we learned from the feedback was, like anything, there's lots of good ideas and maybe some not so good ideas that
some things are good in a drawing, but practicality you got to think about delivery trucks. You've got to think about handicap parking. You've got there are a lot of other issues that pop up.
Lots of other factors, and so this job, in many ways, in many departments, is the ability to navigate and get us to the greatest good. I still 2 years in have dealt with 100% unanimous approvals on anything. Whether that I might get 7-0 vote at council, but that doesn't. I don't get a 55,000 to 0 vote in the public. There's always going to be things. That's part of the complexity and the obligation of this job is to get us to a landing place that does the most good for the most people, that makes the most sense financially. So where do we end? Well, we ended with FPL, stepping up and really beyond their financial obligation of the original project. So we appreciate them being good community partners. And as we sit here today, we're working through those final 90% drawing numbers, that like every project I ever work on are higher than what we thought they were going to be. Right. So we got to navigate that. And this is part of the pitch of why we reform parking, was to say, these are the types of projects we get to do if we actually have revenue to do them. And we're asking our visitors and our non-city residents who are paying the lion's share of the parking revenue, they're helping us out with that, and that it doesn't have to just come from the city residents. So I'll give a couple examples of some things that we changed based on the feedback.
Right.
So very little on-street parking in the United States is handicap accessible. very little. None of ours, because you think about it, you got a curb there, and
right.
it was
in
built,
narrow space.
Yep,
right.
it was built that way. I get dinged sometimes about parking on Palafox. I stopped myself from sharing the photo I saw from the 60s or 70s that had all the meters on Palafox Street. It's like, well, at a time well before this, there actually was some paid parking on Palafox Street, but we don't have much accessibility. And one of the conversations, one of the critiques of some of the parking reform that we had is, hey, I don't mind walking 2 blocks for free parking or paying $1 an hour. But I got my grandmother with me, or I got my, somebody with limited mobility with me. And so we wanted to address all of those things. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the two. We were going to actually recoup for the pedestrian and for the bicyclist. We were going to recoup all of the parking bays on the first block of Palafox from Garden to the north to Romana to the south. So ultimately from Vinyl to the old post office. And we were going to take all of those parking spaces. To now kick it out, we were going to go down to 11 feet lanes. We still are from 12. So we gained 2 feet there. And then you'd have all of that for people to stroll, for people. And we see, I've got every economic data factor that shows the more dwelling time people have, the more money they spend, the more, there's lots of other factors. And so we were going to take all of those. Now, what we've come back with, based on feedback from business owners, from our public, is we're going to take the 2 southernmost bays now, the ones closest to Romana, closest to the post office, that are on Palafox, just north of Romana. And we're going to make those 30-minute free spaces during the day. So you can't, it's 30-minute free. You want to run in and grab a coffee or something at the jewelry store or whatever, you can do that. And then after 5 o'clock, that will be like the airport. It'll be drop on, drop off only. So whether that's an Uber, whether it's someone, and they'll be fully zero curb, ADA accessible on both sides. So now you have a place to drop. If you got to drop someone off to go to dinner, you can do that.
Right.
And we're not limiting someone's accessibility to be able to get on and off at Palafox Street. So, but that's a perfect example of, hey, there's lots of different schools of thought of what makes sense. And some people think one parking spot in front of their business is the lifeblood of their business. Some say we shouldn't have any cars on here. Read the feedback. Some people say, why are you allowing cars on Palafox at all there? And so my job is to take all that information, try to boil it all down, and get us something that makes sense.
And that takes away that congestion that we have right at Garden.
Yes.
With those parking spaces right there. So someone's trying to turn and go south on Palafox, or come up Palafox and get out of downtown. Those parking spaces created logjam.
Well, and safety issues. The one on the northwest side in front of Ride Society and the Kennedy, that one is a full blown safety issue because of people waiting to back in, and then people are stuck out in
and it's blind because you're turning around the building. So it's
exactly
blind turn.
And what I would say, as I've become an amateur nerd in how all of this works. We're going to pay a lot of attention to the renderings on Palafox because why? It's our iconic street. But I think some of the big substantive changes that, if there's such a thing as that we can all agree on, would be what's going to happen around the Garden intersection. And in the net result, when you look at that drawing on the northbound side, so I'm talking about Garden Street, north of Vinyl, north of Kennedy, right there at that intersection. What's going to happen, for example, is when you take that right and come around the Kennedy, going south on Palafox on Garden, that's like a freeway on-ramp right now. It's this big, long turn lane that you don't really need. It's just wasted space. So some of the parking we're going to be recouping is going to be, we're going to eliminate that lane. So now you'll still have the 2 lanes to go east and west. So traffic flow doesn't become a problem, but you're going to take a right out of that lane as opposed to a full-blown
speedway.
Third lane that never has, that we've studied it. We had an engineering firm come study all the traffic flow through there. And now what do we put there instead? We make the walking respite shorter. So now instead of running for your life over a right-hand turn lane, 2 straight lanes, and a left-hand turn lane, you're running to the median to get over to the courthouse. Now we've just narrowed that by 15, 16 feet. And so when we talk about Palafox Market and we talk about all those other things, Garden Street is a huge delta. I mean, literally a canyon to get across. And not only for the market on Saturdays, but as we start to see more retail pop up on the north side of Garden Street, if we want to, we've got to make it more accessible for the pedestrian. So there's a lot, I really encourage people to go check those out too. There's a lot of cool things happening on Garden Street. The addition of parking, the elimination of unneeded turn lanes to make your respite happen sooner, and your safety you feel more and more safe as you get across the street. Increases significantly.
Now, I know the other big challenge has got to be deliveries downtown.
Yes, it is.
It's an issue now where people park. Have you had any kind of meeting with, the delivery people and the business owners?
Yeah, I've had. I plan to. So I've had some phone conversations with some of the more often folks with lots of trucks down there all the time. Obviously beer delivery and food delivery, and where I've left it now is I've kind of just said, hey. Why don't you take a look at this and you give us some general feedback, and then we'll kind of all get together. Because like many things, as your downtown evolves from no one being down there 30 years ago, 40 years ago to now, is you end up making decisions year by year or decade by decade that may have made sense 20 years ago that don't now. And so what's our science behind where our delivery spots are now? None. It's just, we saw some restaurants move in and they said, man, I don't have a place to park a truck. So we put one there. So I think we did the best we can. I don't think anybody was at fault for anything, but while we're opening up this can of worms, why wouldn't we also be looking holistically at strategic delivery locations? So just like residents with parking and businesses with parking, some businesses, some of their anxiety around this project is around delivery. And what I've told them is it's a two-way street. We should strategically look at the entire downtown core to make sure that deliveries are accessible and attainable for you. However, that also is going to require some responsibility from the delivery truck drivers. Because right now, I drive downtown. There'll be two trucks parked in the middle of Government Street, blocking both lanes of the road, right next to a delivery zone. So there's obligation on both sides. Is that if I don't mind accommodating to make sure that life works for the business and the restaurant and the delivery company or the distributor, but we also have to do what we say we're going to do. And so that's what we're going to enter into now. The nice thing about delivery, we don't need that worked out, because that's just striping at the end. So should we put the spots on this side or that side? Should we put delivery here or not there? We've got some time to determine that. So what we're trying to get fixed right now is, when it rains downtown and we put these new curbs in, where's that water go?
Right.
That's the real heavy lifting that we're doing right now. And then paint is paint, and we've got several months to get that all figured out. And so, but I'm definitely committed to doing that.